Good morning, everyone. I am Rachel Ramos, and I will be the one who report the chapter 16, which is in Belgian, Brussels, 1890. On January 28, 1890, Rizal left Paris for Brussels, which is capital of Belgium. The two reasons impelled Rizal to leave Paris are the cost of living in Paris was very high because of the universal explosion, and the gay social life of the city hampered his literary works, especially the writing of his second novel, which is El Filibusterismo. Valentin Ventura invited Rizal to live with him in Paris without paying any rent. But Rizal declined it because he had a high sense of dignity and would not accept charity from any man. Let's proceed to the Rizal's life in Brussels. Rizal was accompanied by Jose Albert when he moved to Brussels. They live in a modest boarding house on 38 Rue Philippine Campaign, run by Suzanne and Marie. Then, when Albert left the city, he was replaced by Jose Alejandro, an engineering student. In Brussels, Rizal was busy writing his second novel, which was a continuation of Nolly. He was never ideal even for an hour. Aside from writing its chapter, he wrote articles for La Solidaridad and letters to his family and friends. Being a physician, he spent part of his time in the medical clinic. For recreation, he had gymnastic at the gymnasium at target practice and fencing at the armory. Speaking of Rizal's frugality, Jose Alejandro, his roommate in Brussels, said Rizal suggested to eat pancit but it was overcalculated, so to remedy the error made, they were compelled to have pancit for lunch and supper for 2 days. These are Rizal's articles in La Solidaridad. During his sojourn in Brussels, Rizal wrote articles for La Solidaridad in defense of his oppressed people and to point out the evils of Spanish rule in the Philippines. Number 1, A la Defensa. This was a reply to an anti-Filipino writing of a Spanish author, Patricio de la Escosura, which was published by La Defensa on March 30, 1889. Number 2, La Verdad para Todos, or The Truth for All. Rizal's defense against the Spanish charge that the native local officials were ignorant and depraved. On May 31, 1889. Number 3, Vicente Barrientos, Teatro Tagalog. In this article, Rizal exposes Barrientos' ignorance on the Tagalog theatric art on June 15, 1889. Number 4, Una Profanacion or A Profanation, a bitter attack against the friars for denying Christian burial to Mariano Herbosa in Calamba because he was a brother-in-law of Rizal. Herbosa, husband of Lucia, died cholera on May 31, 1889. Number 5, Verdades Nuevas or New Truths, a reply to Vicente Belloc Sanchez letter published in La Patricia Madrid newspaper on July 4, 1889, which asserted that the granting of reforms in the Philippines would ruin the peaceful and maternal rule of the priors. Number 6, Crueldad or Cruelty, a brilliant defense of Blumentritt from the scurrilous attacks of his enemies on August 15, 1889. Number 7, Differentias or Differences, a reply to a biased article entitled All Truths published in La Patricia on August 14, 1889, which ridiculed those Filipinos who asked for reforms on September 15, 1889. Number 8, Inconsequentias or Inconsequences, a defense of Antonio Luna against the attack of Pablo Mir Diaz in the Barcelona newspaper El Pueblo Soberano on November 30, 1889. Number 9, Lianto y Risas, or Tears and Laughter, a denunciation of Spanish racial prejudice against the brown Filipinos on November 30, 1889. Rizal mentions in this article how the audience, composed mostly of Spaniards and mestizos, stopped applauding when he received first prize in the literary contest in 1880 because of his brown color. Then the last one, Ingratitudes or Ingratitude, a reply to Governor General Valeriano Weyler, who, while visiting Calamba, told the people that they should not allow themselves to be deceived by the vain promises of their ungrateful sons. On January 15, 1890. In spite of his European education and his knowledge of foreign languages, Rizal loved his own native language. He was the first to advocate the Philippinization of its orthography. For instance, the Tagalog letter K and W should be used instead of the Spanish C and O. Thus, the Hispanized Tagalog word salakot or peasant's headgear should be written salakot, and the Hispanized Tagalog term araw be changed into araw. Rizal's criticized Madrid Filipino for gambling. In Brussels, Rizal received news from Juan Luna and Valentin Ventura that the Filipino in Spain were destroying the good name of their nation by gambling too much. These two compatriots in Paris urged him to do something about it. Accordingly, Rizal wrote to M.H. Del Pilar on May 28, 1899, to remind the Filipinos in Madrid that they did not come to Europe to gamble but to work for their fatherland's freedom. His letter runs as follows. Luna in Paris complains of the gambling of the Filipino in Madrid. So does Ventura. They say that according to news from the Philippines, the parents are very much disgusted. I am afraid we are serving the friar scheme. There is nothing at home to remind them that the Filipino does not come to Europe to gamble and amuse himself, but to work for his liberty and for the dignity of his race. Bad news from home. Letters from home which Rizal received in Brussels worried him. The Calamba agrarian trouble was getting worse. The management of the Dominican hacienda continually raised the land rents until such time that Rizal's father refused to pay his rent. Other tenants, inspired by Don Francisco's courage, also refused to pay their rents. Meanwhile, the tenants, including the Rizal family, were persecuted and ejected from their lands. The sad news from home depressed Rizal. His heart bled to know the sorrowful plight of his parents, brother and brothers-in-law. I have caused much harm to our family, but at least there remains to us the consolation of knowing that the motive is not disgraceful, nor does it humiliate anybody. On the contrary, it raises us up and gives us more dignity in the eyes of our very enemies themselves. To fall with the head high and the brow serene is not to fall, is to triumph. The sad thing is to fall with the stain of dishonor. Moreover, I may be what my enemies desire me to be, yet never an accusation are they able to hurl against me, which makes me blush or lower my forehead. And I hope that God will be merciful enough with me to prevent me from committing one of those faults which would involve my family. This was Rizal wrote to his sister Soledad on June 6, 1890. Presentiment of death. In his moment of despair, Rizal had bad dreams during the nights in Brussels when he was restless because he was always thinking of his unhappy family in Calamba. Although he was not superstitious, he feared that he would not live long. He was not afraid to die, but he wanted to finish his second novel before he went to his grave. This morbid presentiment of early death was divulged by him to M.H. Del Pilar in a letter from Brussels dated June 11, 1890. In a letter, Rizal said, "Sad presentiments assault me, though I do not give them entire credence. In my childhood, I had a strange belief that I would not reach 30 years of age. I do not know why I thought this. There were 2 months during which almost every night I had no other dream than that my friends and relatives were dead. Once I dreamed that I descended by a path a multitude of persons seated, dressed in white, with white faces, silent and surrounded by white light. There I saw my two brethren, one of them already dead and the other one still alive. Although I do not believe in these things, and although my body is very strong and I have no illness and have no fear, I am preparing myself for death and for any eventuality. Laong Laan, or Ever Ready, is my true name. For this reason, I want to finish at all cost the second volume of the Nolly, and if it is possible, I do not want to leave unfinished what nobody else could continue. Do not believe that I am depressed or sad. Every 2 days I go to the gymnasium and practice fencing and shooting, but who can tell any misfortune that may come? The next slide is preparation to go home. In the face of suffering which afflicted his family, Rizal decided to go home. He could not stay in Brussels writing a book while his parents, relatives, and friends in distant Philippines were in despair. Hearing that Graciano Lopez Haino was planning to go to Cuba, he wrote to Ponce on July 8, 1890, opposing Graciano's plan of action. He said that Cristiano should not go to Cuba to die of yellow fever. Instead, he ought to go to the Philippines to allow himself to be killed in defense of his ideals. Adding, Rizal said, "We have only once to die, and if we do not die, we lose an opportunity which will not again be presented to us." And all his friends were horrified of Rizal's plan. In another letter to Ponce, dated July 18, 1890, he expressed his determination to go home. He said that, "I want to go back to the Philippines, and although I know it would be daring and imprudent, what does that matter? The Filipinos are all very prudent, and that is why our country is going the way she is, as it seems to me that we are not making any progress by following prudence. I am going to look for another pathway. The only thing that can detain me is a doubt whether my parents agree. I am afraid to disturb their last years. In case they should object to my homecoming, I would work for a livelihood in some other part of the world." But all his friends, including Blumentritt, Maria Basa, and Ponce, were horrified by Rizal's plan to return to the Philippines. They warned him to the danger that awaited him at home. Decision to go to Madrid. Rizal did not heed the dire warnings of his friends. No threat of danger could change his plan. However, something happened that suddenly made him change his mind. It was a letter from Pasiano which related that they lost the case against the Dominicans in Manila, but they appealed it to the Supreme Court in Spain. Rizal wrote to M.H. Del Pilar on June 20, 1890, retaining the latter's services as lawyer. He was going to Madrid in order to supervise the handling of the case. And in another letter to Ponce, written at Brussels, July 29, 1890, Rizal announced that he was leaving Brussels at the beginning of the following month and would arrive in Madrid about the 3rd of or 4th in August. To my muse 1890. It was against a background of mental anguish in Brussels. During those sad days when he was worried by family disasters, that he wrote his pathetic poem, which is Ami, or To My Muse. This poem lacks the exquisiteness of To the Flowers of Heidelberg and is less polished than To the Filipino Youth, but it is passionate in feeling. To my muse. Invoke no longer is the muse, the lyre is out of date. The poet is no longer used, and youth is inspired now imbued with other form and state. If today our fancy aught of verse would still require, Heliconsis remains unsought, and without heed we but inquire why the coffee is not brought in the place of thought sincere, that our hearts may feel. We must seize a pen of steel, and with verse and line severe, fling abroad a jest and jeer. Muse, that in the past inspired me, and with songs of love hast fired me. Go thou now to full repose, for today in sordid prose I must earn the gold that hard me. Now must I ponder deep, meditate and struggle on. In sometimes I must weep, for he who love would great pain has undergone. Fleet are the days of ease, the days of love's delight, when flowers still would please, and give to suffering souls surcease from pain and sorrow's blight. One by one they have passed on, all I love and move among, dead or married from me gone. For all I place my heart upon by fate adverse are stung. Go thou to, O Muse, depart. Other regions fairer find, for my land but offers art for the laurel, chains that bind for a temple prisons blind. But before thou leaves me, speak, tell me with my voice sublime, thou couldst ever from me seek a song of sorrow for the weak, defiance to the tyrant's crime. Romance with Petit Jacobi. Two things brought some measure of cheer to the despondent Rizal as he was preparing for his trip to Madrid. First was the summertime festival of Belgium, which was celebrated in carnival style, with colorful costumes, fantastic floats, and many days of merriment. Second was his romance with Petit Jacobi, the pretty niece of his landladies. Rizal was so charming and dignified a gentleman that Petit Hussein was attracted to him. He was lonely in a strange country and Leonor Rivera was so far away. Naturally, being a normal young man, he found certain bliss in the company of a pretty Belgian girl. He might have flirted with Petit Hussein, but he could not stoop low to a deceptive amorous relationship. And the last slide, like other women, Segunda Katigbak, Orang Valenzuela, Leonor Rivera, o sa isan, Getty Beckett, Consuelo Ortiga E. Ray, and the Boston sisters. Suzanne fell in love with Rizal. She cried when he left toward the end of July 1890 for Madrid, stopping for a few days in Paris. Although Rizal was in faraway Madrid, Suzanne could not forget him. She wrote to him in French, "Where are you now? Do you think of me once in a while? I am reminded of our tender conversations. Reading your letter, although it is cold and indifferent, here in your letter I have something which makes up for your absence. How pleased I would be to follow you, to travel with you, who are always in my thoughts. You wish me all kinds of luck, but forget that in the absence of a beloved one, a tender heart cannot feel happy. A thousand things serve to distract your mind, my friend, but in my case, I am sad, lonely, always alone with my thoughts. Nothing, absolutely nothing relieves my sorrow. Are you coming back? That's what I want and desire most ardently. You cannot refuse me. I do not despair and I limit myself to murmuring against time which runs so fast when it carries us towards a separation, but goes so slowly when it's bringing us together again. I feel very happy thinking that perhaps I might never see you again. Goodbye. You know, with one word, you can make me very happy. Aren't you going to write to me? This letter wrote by Suzanne for Rizal. And that's all. Thank you for listening. I hope you've learned something in this lesson.